This week we chose Woman in Gold.
After her early life was torn to shreds, Maria Altman left her past behind when she immigrated to America. However, after her sister's passing, Maria discovered everything that she had given up on could now be reclaimed and enlisted the help of a lawyer, Randy. When their case brings them full circle to her past, Maria must decide, is her trauma going to define her legacy or will it be her resilience?
Teresa, I know, spoiler alert, this is one of your favorite independent movies that we've gotten the privilege of seeing over the years. But I was hoping you could kind of enlighten our cinema community into more reasons why you chose this movie.
Other than that, I really like it. Yeah, no, I would say why I liked it is there is a legal aspect to it, and I like legal dramas. I will say, even if you aren't particularly prone to legal dramas, you'll still really like the movie. I know for me, the acting was powerful, and the story. For those in our cinema community who aren't familiar with the story, it's about restitution, and it's about during Maria Altman's family were overtaken by the Nazis in Austria, and all of their possessions were looted, artwork, jewelry. They had to flee for their lives, and some of them lost their lives. And the whole idea of restitution from such a horrible period of time is so powerful to me. And it wasn't just the artwork that was taken. It was the story behind the artwork. It was the relationship. This is Maria's aunt, the person who was the subject for Klint's paintings. And I think that's the other part that needs to be said is, during Hitler's regime in Europe, so many pieces were burned or destroyed. And for the pieces that were taken from these people who either lost their lives or family that had lost their lives, it was so powerful that the thought of they could get these back. And the paintings represented her family. And it wasn't, this is a wonderful artist who painted something beautiful, although that is the case. It's her legacy or her family connection was taken away from her. So to me, that's very powerful.
I like this movie for a lot of the same reasons, but I think it's ultimately the hope and the promise of the past not being something to fear, even though it is a very emotionally wrought time period for Maria. Even before the war was reaching their place of living, they were still reckoning with just daily concerns. In fact, there's one scene in the movie where they talk about, yes, we're going to have a wedding, but tomorrow we die, basically.
Yes.
And I think Maria running away from her past is something that a lot of us can relate to, especially when it involves people we would rather not deal with. And for Maria, it was very tangible. There are people dying in the streets. There are people losing everything. And Maria and her family were very lucky that they had the resources not to lose as much, but they still lost something in the fact that the painting was so personal. It's not just, this is an iconic piece of art. This is an iconic piece of art that is so closely tied. And the filmmaking is very smart on this film. If you know Adele Bloch-Bauer 1, you know which painting we're talking about. It's arguably Gustav Klint's second most iconic piece of work, right behind The Kiss.
Yeah.
But the movie almost kind of teases you until you see the full painting. And I think that's kind of clever filmmaking because it elicits the emotion that way you're trying to get.
Well, and I love the part that her relationship with her aunt, right, the subject of the painting, they unpack that. And to me, I love that because there is that personal connection. There's that family connection. And as you said, running away. And that wasn't uncommon for people, during World War II that had fled or that had survived World War II that came to the United States to never speak of.
Some families that I've known don't even tell their grandkids that they lived through this.
Well, and they don't tell their children prior to that. Their children.
Suddenly we're here in America. And it's like, yeah, how'd you end up there? Well, that's awkward. We're not going to talk about that.
Correct. And you can understand that if you come from an experience of heavy trauma or you've had that, you can understand why they wouldn't want to talk about it and just have great empathy for that. So for her to pursue, and we're talking about, right, enlisting the help of an attorney to get these pictures back. And her original life did not include going after these paintings. It was only after her sister passed away, reading the letters, reconnecting with her past, then she started to have the courage to, and I would say courage. It took a lot of courage because, as you said, she had to face a lot. But any person going through the whole legal process, she actually had to go back to Austria with her attorney. She came, she lived in, I think it was like Beverly Hills or right out, or no, it was Southern California. I think her attorney lives in Brentwood in Los Angeles County now. But to try to help someone understand why this is so important and so valuable, and this young attorney taking on her case for multiple years.
That's the other thing about this movie. It's very deceptive in terms of the time frame that this takes course over. You'd be forgiven for thinking that this movie only takes the course of like 3 or 4 years.
No, and it's long. It is. And the commitment on both of their parts to go through this. And the budget for this movie was actually relatively low. It was between I think 70 and 90 and made like 155 or so. Released in Austria, Germany, United States. And so I think it's a movie that needs to be told, but obviously I'm slightly biased because I believe history needs to be told.
The other thing is there's a lot of pieces in museums that have been taken.
Absolutely.
And especially in my generation and the generation now are confronting the reality that these pieces belong to people. It's not just we found them one day and decided to go for it. It's, no, we took them and we have a responsibility to acknowledge the story of these pieces, which involves that.
And I agree with that. And if our cinema community has seen Monuments Men, George Clooney directed, Matt Damon, George Clooney, I believe John Goodman was in it also. That came the year before. And that's actually based on a book as well around the recovering of such pieces.
There's a very powerful documentary that I would mention, but YouTube would flag us for it. But that is also a really interesting look. If you look up art theft, World War II, you should be able to find it.
World War II was before our time. However, the impacts have still been felt. As you said, grandparents, parents not being able to share. Of course, we think about Steven Spielberg and the Shoah Project, where he recorded countless interviews. And that was happening. I remember before you were born, they were actively seeking people to perform interviews. I know I reached out to them, and it was powerful.
I know when I was a kid, you actually, some people may argue it's traumatic, but I don't think it was for me. I think for our family, especially, it was a very necessary historical piece.
Correct.
To have a conversation that we need to. As an artist, this is really talked about in the movie, how a point of view is something that is also erased when people are taken away.
That's
Not
good.
just...
That's really good.
Not just the cultural legacy, but it's also a point of view. It's also something that it's a perspective that is seen.
Well, and even in the movie, Randy, the attorney, and my understanding is the timeline's a bit different in terms of his level of awareness. But at one point in the movie, he connects with Maria, goes back to his space. His wife's pregnant, has their first child. And his then awareness comes to play where his grandparents and understand that because he's a Jewish man as well. And the connection he starts to feel with that time period and what horrors his family experienced. And you fast forward over time as they work through, coming back, trying to get the paintings. There's a part where he then starts to connect with the Los Angeles Holocaust Museum and donating to them, helping them to create a new building. He was one of their first presidents for the museum, and just seeing how he was changed. And that's the hope, right? That people start to connect with themselves, because even if you're not Jewish, you could understand being, as you said, silenced, being minimized and treated horribly in losing family. I think many people can identify with that, either living in this country or having family that has experienced that. It's really is an important dialogue to have, I think.
Well, the whole concept of erasure is just littered through this movie. Teresa mentioned Randy kind of grappling with his ancestry being tainted by this event. I thought it was a really powerful choice that the filmmakers chose to use, because I feel like a weaker filmmaker would have just been like, oh, now he cares. But instead, Maria talks about how she knew his grandfather.
Correct. That's correct. And to be clear,
And
it's not
bridges the
every
generational gap.
every family knows every family, or
That's a
if you're
stereotype.
exactly right. If you're a therapist, you know every therapist. If you're a lawyer, you know every lawyer. That's not necessarily true, but in their situation in Austria, they did. And I think that's powerful to say, I knew your family, and I think that spoke to him.
Well, and it wasn't just, I know your family because we go to the same social events. She kindly relates to Randy several stories
Correct.
and characteristics that kind of remind her of the family. And I think the most powerful thing this movie deals with is loss. And that's a very terrifying thing as a filmmaker to grapple with, because on one hand, if you do it too well, for the audience, they'll be overwhelmed by it.
Correct.
If you have a light touch to it, almost too light of a touch, the audience will treat it as a joke. And I don't think this movie does either. I think it finds the balance excellently.
It does it well. It does it so well, and I agree with that. I think the screenplay was phenomenal. The music, phenomenal. And I think all the pieces work together so well.
I like how this movie leads with his heart first,
Yes.
and then follows with the story second.
I agree with that,
I
too.
think that makes the movie a better movie for it. It makes it less dry. It's still a dry movie, but it's a definitely more exciting, entertaining experience, because I want to follow Maria on her journey more easily.
Correct. And you want to know what happens. And I know for me, as you said, it's one of the movies I really enjoy. Even though I know how it's going to go, I know what happens in the end, I still enjoy it each time. 1 to 5 moths, what do you think?
I'm going to say a 3 for this one.
A 3 for this one. Number one reason why?
It's a solid movie. There's a couple things that they chose to do, I think, that kind of dampened the movie, but it's a pretty well put together movie.
I would give it a solid 4 moth rating. I don't think it's perfect. However, I think the music comes together, cinematography, the story, the acting come together really well. But there are a few elements in my mind that are missing. It's a little bit on the longer side. I think they could have developed a few of the other characters. I know Randy's wife was pretty flat.
That was my big complaint.
Yeah.
I remember I talked with you about that.
Yeah, it just felt a little flat. So a little bit of his life outside of his relationship with Maria felt a little bit flat and not too interesting. The other part we had talked about, I know, is Maria has a large backstory, not just when she was a child and her experience there, but beyond that.
I think that would have allowed the audience to see the degree of how hard, how fast she was trying to run away from this. And I think it would have given them more insight on how powerful it was that she decided to reimburse herself into her past life.
Correct. And I think that would have given me a 5 rating. Thank you for watching this Cocoon Cast clip. This clip was taken from our weekly show, which is released on Saturdays.
If you enjoyed this video, click the link or head over to our main channel for more movie reviews, Hollywood news with a slice of snark. Thank you for watching, and remember,
Movies are
better together.